All right, we are back with another special edition for you. Our special guest is a world renowned musician, writer, performer. You know him from everything from Steeler to Wasp to Sin to all the above. It is the one and only
and,
Rick Fox.
and beyond.
There you go. You
And
got your cape on.
surgical steel,
Well,
etc., and so forth.
yes. Well, we're talking and celebrating Kiss, and of course the late great Ace Frehley. But more importantly, they were one of our first musical superheroes. We used to have cartoons. We had
Yep.
Saturday morning cartoons.
Yes, we did.
It would take us, into a different world with our toys and our, the commercials and movies and we had the Batman show and this and that. But here comes Kiss in '73 with the makeup, the stage effects, and the whole show. They changed the game, but you go back well before that first album and that first national tour.
Yes, I did.
Remind us of those early Kiss connections with Peter.
I was in high school, '72, and Peter Chris's family moved into an apartment around the corner from my house. I was on North Henry Street. They're around the corner on Monitor Avenue, Monitor Avenue. That's Norman Avenue and Monitor Street. Upstairs over a bar. In Greenpoint, there was like a bar almost every block, and apartments up over the bars. And so I would see Mrs. Criscola and the girls, at least two of the sisters, when they would go food shopping. They'd come right down our street, and they'd come walking back. And if I was outside, Mrs. Criscola would look over. She'd smile, "Hi, how you doing?" Didn't know who she was, but she was very pleasant. And the two girls didn't look kind of like everybody else. They looked ethnic. The black, wavy hair or dark Italian, strong Italian features. And I would see them down the end of the street playing ball with each other, and I thought, they were cute. And so little by little, I'd kind of work my way down the end of the street. And of course, every once in a while, whether intentionally or accidentally intentionally, they would lose control of the ball and it would come bounce towards me and I would toss it back to them. That kind of broke the ice. They made some funny comments. I made comments back. Like, oh, real wise guys. Okay, so they can handle that. In New York, a lot of people outside New York don't understand it. Sarcasm and that kind of attitude is a survival tool. It's a way of life in New York. And if you can't cut the dozens and wisecrack back with somebody, you get your ass beat. So smart ass comments back and forth. So one thing led to another. We got to talking and hanging out, and through the course of that, and Peter was, I think, just coming out of Chelsea at the time. Their album had been out. It didn't do that great, so he wasn't particularly pleased about that. But in the course of our conversations, they said, "Well, our big brother, he's a rock star. Our brother Peter." And I was like, "Oh, okay, oh, great. Maybe someday I'll meet him." And then he had a younger brother who was closer to my age, with Joey, and he was like an artist. I was an artist, so we'd compare artwork, and he was big into the Rolling Stones and like that. So we had some common ground to kind of all get together and talk about things. And then one day Peter did, when he would go into Manhattan, he'd drive Lydia's car, his wife Lydia Chris. He would drive her car. He had a Chevy silver Chevy Nova, and he'd stop by the house, visit the family, the mother, the father, and all that, Joe and Loretta, the mother, and then go into the city or whatever. And so at some point he had put in the ad. Drummer and Gene and Paul saw his ad, and they got together. And next thing you know, Peter's now hooked up with Gene and Paul, and they're rehearsing at their loft on 23rd Street in Manhattan. And he'd stop by the house, and when I finally got to meet him, wow, this guy does look like a rock star. The tight jeans, he had platform boots, layered hair. We call it a shag haircut. And he always wore round glasses because Peter's face kind of looked a little bit like John Lennon, like an older John Lennon, and with the round glasses, that synced. He looked just like an English glammed out rock and roll version of John Lennon. And he'd say, well, I'm rehearsing with these guys. You want to come hear us? And we'd say, yeah. So we'd all pile into the car. And their friend Anne-Marie Hughes, who lived around the corner, and my high school friend, John Alton, who I introduced to Donna Criscola. And he wound up dating her. I started dating Joanne. And so, we'd all go to Manhattan and go to their loft on 23rd Street and watch them rehearse. Gene was always the condescending smartass. Paul kind of seemed a little snobby, like he didn't want to deal with us, and you're just a bunch of kids and like that. And it was Peter, and so we would sit there and watch them rehearse, and it was about half a dozen or so of the songs that are on the first album. Deuce, Strutter, Firehouse, Cold Gin, like that. Let Me Know. Like that, and we'd never seen or heard anything like this before. To be sitting right there in the same room with these rock stars or potential world rock stars, we were watching the future unfold in front of us. Who'd have thought these guys were going to be like one of the biggest bands in the history of the world? But they had that winning attitude even back then in the loft. They were very confident about themselves. And they were going to conquer the world. And so, the songs were there was no yardstick to compare their music against because what did they sound like? They had elements of like Humble Pie, Slade, Beatles with the harmonies and the lyrics. It was like the Beatles on 11, like that. And Ace wasn't in the band yet. It was just the three-piece, the three guys, like that, and we'd go watch them. Then we'd have to take the train home because Peter wasn't going to drive us back, and we did that several times. We'd go to the loft, watch them rehearse, and really getting into it. Eventually, they started to say, "So, what do you think? What do you think of this? What do you think of that?" And asking us, how we felt about their music, and we were like, "Guys are dynamite, just like total rock and roll dynamite." Something about the arrangements of the music really reached in and got a hold of us, And then we missed a few rehearsals, and then Peter had said they got a guitar player. We weren't going there for the auditions. That was closed. They didn't have audiences anybody to watch when they were doing the auditions. And I understand years later, Bob Kulick auditioned, and a whole bunch of people auditioned for them. JJ, I think they talked to JJ French from Twisted Sister. There was a whole bunch of rockers from New York. And then we went up there one day, and there's this tall, skinny guy in a gray pinstripe suit, purple sneaker, red sneaker, orange sneaker. He had all these different colored sneakers. He would interchange them, but I remember that they didn't match. And he was leaning against the wall. His Les Paul was slung down low. And they went into the songs, and this guy's playing, he's ripping leads. Like, Jesus, where did this guy come from? And he's leaning against the wall, and not really intermingling with the band while they're playing. So I remember Paul going over to him and like pushing him, nudging him with his shoulders, his arm. Come on, get off the wall, come over, like that. And Ace would kind of like, all right, and he'd work his way off the wall. Then he'd kind of wobbly back and forth a little bit. Like that, and that was our first introduction to seeing the Ace Frehley. He was already in the band, and of course Deuce, their opening song, and these guys playing. Me and John was a guitar player, I was a budding bass player, and we're studying what is this guy playing because we'd never heard anything like this before. And Ace had his own style even then. You could hear it from song to song. He'd play a lot of similar phrasings and patterns. And he claims that, Ace claimed that, it was Clapton and Hendrix and Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, those were his influences. I didn't really listen to much Jeff Beck, but we all knew Zeppelin and like that. And so he was the perfect complement. He was the final nail in the coffin, or final, whatever you want to call it, that made the sound. Now
the final leg on the table.
That too. It was the whole package was complete. Okay, so it's like now where do they go from there? Because these guys were hot, and during that junction they were trying to find out visually who they were. You know, in their early pictures, they kind of had makeup like the dolls or whatever it is. That shot of them in the stairwell of the loft, and Gene's got his hair all frosted, and Ace is sitting there like this. Looks like Shirley MacLaine with the cigarette in his lip. They were trying to explore and find out who they were, and they said, we're big guys. We can't look like the dolls. We can't look like all the other bands, the glam bands in the New York rock scene that had similar looks and wore similar makeup. Because, you had the dolls, and you had the Harlots of 42nd Street, which looked like the dolls, the Brats, the Planets, Luger, some bands that wore makeup. Everybody was copying what was coming over from England. And Rod Stewart and the Small Faces, if you look at the album Not As Good As a Wink to a Blind Horse, that was the look, the marionettes on the back. Tight stovepipe jeans or velvet, corduroy jeans, platform shoes, and a hairstylist, Paul McGregor, came over from England because he was cutting all the rock stars' hair. He's introducing this new cut. Rod Stewart had it called a rooster. And, you cut the top and it kind of, sticks up like that. Yeah. Ronnie Wood had it. He was cutting the bands in England, and he came over to America, and he was doing the movie stars. Jane Fonda, who else? All the stars from the 70s were getting these layered haircuts like that. It became a thing. So a lot of the bands in New York had that similar hairstyle, layered at the top, long down like this on the sides. And the guys in Kiss had their hair layered as well. I didn't know about what the style was called. And one of the days when Peter came over with Lydia to visit, the parents around the corner, I expressed interest in wanting to have a haircut like that. Peter says, he was like the big brother I never had. Peter goes, get me a pair of scissors and two tall boys, meaning the Budweiser 16-ounce, the tall boy cans. So I got him the beers, I got him the scissors, and I sat there, and Peter Criss gave me my first rock and roll haircut. I cut the layers in my hair like that, and I went back to my house, and my grandmother was always bitching about, the hair and the length and all of that. And it was only like maybe up to here. I was still in high school. And she goes, I don't like it. Cut some more. So I go back to the house. I told my Peter, he goes, so what the hell's wrong with her? He goes, your haircut looks fine. And he didn't want to cut any more of it. He just embellished the layers a little bit. That was it. And that was, 72 into 73. That was my first rock and roll haircut from Peter Criss. And so we got to hang out with Peter and Lydia all the time. Every time they came over, we were over there hanging out with them. And then of course we'd go up to the loft, we'd watch the band rehearse like that, and then they started doing gigs. They had other rock bands in New York had these industrial lofts, empty loft where they would rehearse, and so they did shows with the Brats. I missed those first couple of introductory shows like that, but nobody wanted to go on after Kiss because it was so heavy, and they just looked cool, and so there was a little bit of rivalry, but everybody still pretty much got along in the New York rock scene. It wasn't like California where everybody was backstabbing. So there was that. And then they did the show at the Diplomat, the Hotel Diplomat on 42nd Street. So, I snuck out of the house with a bag with my rock clothes because I couldn't leave looking like that. And we'd go around the corner to Criscola's. We'd go coordinate. We'd go get on the subway, go to Manhattan. I would change my clothes, and we're all sitting in the front row, the seats in front of the stage in the ballroom. I had this is now the Rick Fox, the marketing guy, starting to think of things to something cool. I bought a bag of balloons. I blew up each balloon individually, drew the Kiss logo on it, and deflated it. And if you touch the ink from the magic marker, it'll smear. So we had to lay them in a cigar box real carefully. So when we got to the Diplomat, I opened up the box and gently, I was carefully handing out the balloons to Joanne and Donna, Amory and John, and we were blowing them up like that. And once it's expanded, the ink didn't smear. And we're sitting there, each of us, with armfuls of balloons. And Kiss comes on. They open up with Deuce, like they always do. And we all got up at the same time and launched at the stage all of these armfuls of balloons with the Kiss logo on them. They didn't know what happened. They didn't. What is this? They thought it was just somebody throwing balloons. But then they were looking at Gene's playing, and he's looking at them, and it had Kiss logos on them. And he's doing his monster thing, like, Ray Harryhausen monster. And he's stomping on the balloons. Ace is kicking him around the stage. Paul's kicking him around the stage. Then there's Kiss balloons all over the place. And behind us, before Kiss went on, was Bill Aucoin and one of his business partners. And we overheard them talking. He's in a suit. Nobody else in the room looks like he's got a suit on. The person with him's got a dressy outfit on. I don't remember if it was a male or female. But we did overhear them saying, it's getting late. Maybe we should just get running. We got other stuff to do. And we heard that. And all of us turned around. Me, Joanne, Donna, John, Amory, and we went, no. No, you ain't leaving. You can't leave. You got to stay and see Kiss. So Bill looks at his partner and he goes, all right, what about him? Impress me, whatever. And we said, you got to see them. They're the newest, heaviest band in the world. You got to see these guys. They're incredible. And our youthful enthusiasm and exuberance convinced Bill Aucoin to stay. Right? I mean, we were in the front row. He was sitting right behind us. So after the show, I walked around. I was looking for wherever the dressing room was. And I walked in his room. And there's Gene with the towel, and he's talking to Bill Aucoin. And as I walk up, Bill looks, oh, this is the young fella that prevented us from leaving. Him and his friends convinced us to stay. And Gene's like, well, is that a fact? All right, well, we'll have to... Thank you very much. Okay, well, thanks for doing that, And so you did that, huh? Yeah, we did that. We were those guys. We kept him from leaving to see you. We didn't know who he was. Well, that fateful moment, that led to them signing up with Bill Aucoin. So I'd like to think that we were instrumental somehow in some small way of bringing that to the table.
If they would have walked out the door, history may have been a little different.
Maybe he would have seen him somewhere at another show, because Gene was constantly sending out invitations, and making copies of this, that, and the other, and press releases and stuff. And they would self-market themselves, trying to get people from the industry to come get involved with them. So, we all I can say is we prevented Bill Aucoin from leaving. And they
were coming off of the less than lackluster Wicked Lester with Gene and Paul.
Yeah, we heard them talk about Wicked Lester, but we had never seen anything about it. They talked about an album cover that had a kid that looked like he was out of the Little Rascals, like a punk kid sitting on a stoop, the front stairs of an apartment building, and he had a dog next to him, and he was kind of like, and that was, I heard them talk about it, but I had never seen it until years and years later, when the Wicked Lester album or CD finally got released. And so we just heard them talk about it, but we didn't know anything about that. And so that was it. They eventually hooked up, and Bill signed them. I'll get you a deal within X amount of time, or we'll just call it even, like this, as the story goes. And then Bill was involved with a partner of his named Sean Delaney, who did off-Broadway stuff. He was a production manager, a songwriter, choreographer. And Bill hooked, they watched the band play. Sean watched them play. He would videotape them like a coach does with a football team. Yeah. And then they would watch it afterwards and critique themselves. Well, you could do this here. That's kind of weak. Maybe we should work on it. Like that. Positive input.
Yeah.
And what can we
polish the strengths and weaknesses?
You took words right out of my mouth. And of course, they were still kind of experimenting with the makeup. Okay, so they played at the Coventry. I was there for at least one of the Coventry shows. And I took pictures. And now they had new amps, all brand new amps. They had new clothing. I want to say it wasn't a lot of stage costume, but they had upgraded what their personal images were. I mean, Ace only had a black T-shirt that said Ace on it and studs. But he had I think they all went out and had boots. Bass had some, the lightning boots. Paul had some new boots. He got a new guitar. Gene was playing the Charlie LeBeau bass that he had. He was starting to, bat out himself, with the wings and stuff like that. I don't remember if he did the Breathe the Fire again, Firehouse. One of the things he used to do was he used to come out and throw a bucket of confetti, like Rip Taylor used to. Rip Taylor used to do, and
water.
Yeah, but it was confetti. And Bill Aucoin advised them, don't do that. Don't do stuff where you're going to have to go out and interact with the audience. That'll freak them out much more over the top than how you guys already look. And in some early press photos, Peter Criss had a rhinestone jeweled knife, and he was holding it, or he'd have it in his sleeve. Bill goes, we got to lose the knife. We don't want to inspire people to bring knives to a show. Things like that, And Sean, being the choreographer that he was the guy instrumental in teaching them that little movement they do in Deuce, where they rock back and forth to the music, and then they turn, they do it that way while Ace is playing a solo, then they turn again, and then now it's all three of them, Ace, Paul, and Gene up front doing that. Sean was the guy who helped work with them on that, and worked with some songwriting stuff, so he was involved. Sean was involved in everything that the band did. They were pumping everything they had into Kiss. And I would sometimes, when they finally, I was a foot messenger in Manhattan, in Midtown Manhattan, for an off-stat printing company. So I had to go up and down Madison Avenue, Lexington Avenue, Fifth Avenue, Sixth Avenue, Seventh Avenue, with on foot, picking up and delivering artwork that needed to be lithographed, like that, and newspaper ads, things like that. So Aucoin Management was on East 55th Street. I think it was 55 East 55th Street. So I was going up their office anytime I would pass by there, and Bill would make small talk, and I didn't dress like just a T-shirt and jeans. I had like a velvet corduroy blazer. I tried to look like a rock star back then, and I have a picture of it somewhere. And so he picked my brains. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? He goes, you know what? Sean wants to talk to you about something. And so I'd go into their conference room, and he was already starting to work with what became the band Stars, who were still Fallen Angel at the time. And he's got all this artwork laid out on a table, costume designs, logo designs. What do you think about this? And he's picking my young fan brain of you're a rock fan. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Like that. And then I put together a scrapbook that I had. It was a huge, big 3-ring binder that had a pebble grain leather on the outside of it. And I took a belt off of one of my jackets, and I stapled a belt that you could lock it with this belt. And I put the Kiss logo on it in glitter. I was even doing our own T-shirts with the Kiss logo in glitter. Once they finalized and came up with the name Kiss, that was, and Paul drew it and Ace refined it, or Ace drew it and Paul refined it, with the lightning S's like that. Yeah. And there was no reference to anything that had to do with SS in Germany. That's just the way they created it, I guess. And it looked uniform, like a package. And so we were glittering our own T-shirts. We were really street level promotion for Kiss. And so I would try to sketch from memory whatever their signature positions were that they would do on stage. Certain positions Gene would stand in, or certain movements he would do, like his Harryhausen monster, or things Paul would do. Or they would get the three of them together. Ace would be like standing with this one leg forward, and Gene would stride on Ace's leg, like a horse dance, over Ace's leg, and Paul would come up, and it was like the three of them all clustered together. And I remember, and so I would draw these things out, and that was in my scrapbook, and I would show them to Bill Aucoin and like that. So he saw how much I was so into this band that they're influencing me. Everything about them was influencing me. and so I've got pictures of them playing at the Coventry, and then most of my pictures over the years have been illegally copied and reproduced and sold to globally around the world. Kiss fans were snapping them up, not knowing who was the actual photographer, me right here, and I didn't know anything about watermarking, so I couldn't watermark my name on the pictures. I was a member of the photography club in high school. Now we had a dark room up on the third floor, so as I'm now taking pictures of Kiss, I could go into the dark room, shut the door, and I had access to all of the photographic equipment that I could get my hands on for free, including film. I had the trays, the chemicals, the paper, the red light, the whole schmear. I was in there for like hours, developing, making, how should I do it? Darker, lighter, learning how to be a photographer. And then they did the that press show at what used to be the Fillmore East when they got signed. It was a big press to do thing like
For
that.
the media?
Yeah, exactly. And so for Casablanca and all of that, it was kind of like we're introducing Kiss to the world officially now.
This is where Neil Bogart's on for the first time?
Exactly. Neil was there. I don't remember seeing him specifically, but they said he was there. And in the background, against the back wall, and this is my first time being in a theater this size. There was what looked like like a spider web made out of rope, which I was told belonged to Alice Cooper because they had been rehearsing there like the week or so before. I just left it there. So they took the Kiss logo. Now the Kiss logo was made, and they flew it. And they all the way up, and it's hanging from the chains, in front of this spider web, this rope spider web. And off on stage, right in the corner where the monitor mix was Sean Delaney, and all those guys, with their headsets on. And Kiss came out and did the show, and there was nobody sitting in like the first 10, 15 rows, or maybe 10 rows. It was empty. People were afraid of these guys. So I had front row access to wherever I needed to be to take pictures. My dad bought me a really expensive 35 millimeter German camera, and I just went to town. And I'm taking my pictures. I mean, Ace would come up to the front of the stage and do a solo, and bend his knees, like he was trying to play with gravity, whatever. And he's like, maybe 8 feet away from me, 6 to 8 feet away. So I got some really intense close-ups. And my camera flash would kind of highlight and accent the silver on their black outfits. So you could see little reflections of the camera flash coming off their silver. At this particular show, Paul changed his makeup. And he went from the star, now he went to like this, what they call a bandit raccoon makeup. It looked like 2 upside-down triangles, like a mask. And then he changed his makeup for that show. So I got pictures of that. And I think because as a photographer, I would study. When Gene was getting ready to blow the fire at the end of Firehouse, I didn't understand all the technical aspects of what he was doing, but he had the liquid in his mouth, and he comes out with the torch, and he's moving it back and forth like that. What he's trying to do is kind of find out where the breeze is. If there's a breeze, so it'll blow away from him and not at him. And I could see him kind of like working the muscles of his lips before he would spit it out. I'm watching all this through my camera lens, and finally when he'd stop, just as I hit the shutter button was when he went, and I was the only guy in New York, photographer at the time, who could catch the flame from his lips all the way out into a fireball. And I have a picture of him doing that. I think there was another photographer there, but I don't think he got that. I just, after watching him so many times, I got to know where the cues were coming. So I knew what to watch for, like that. And they're doing their thing, they're strutting back. These guys had swagger like nobody's business. And they swagger past, and I'm like taking pictures. They're like right here over me, like that. And I went back and I got wide master shots and things like that. And Gene, when he was doing I want everybody to clap like that, and he's with the tongue. I got some pretty good expressions on his face.
So about how
You know,
many songs did they do at this performance?
it's pretty much almost the whole what you hear on the first album.
Okay.
Strutter, Firehouse, Black Diamond. Uh, 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 uh,
7 or 8 tracks, maybe.
yeah. It was a quick. Those songs are all what, maybe 3 minutes long, 4 minutes at the tops. So it was a pretty fast, short set. Maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes, like that. Just hit and get out. And I got in trouble earlier on because I overheard them talking about who were some of the people they invited. A lot of celebrities from the music industry. And a lot of us grew up in New York listening to WNEW-FM. They were like the progressive FM station with all these famous DJs. Allison Steele, the Nightbirds, Scott Muni, this one, that one. And I made up these little, about the size of a cell phone, the little flyers that look like miniature tickets, and it had the Kiss logo on it, and it said, celebrities who may be there, who were invited, and I put, the names of some of the stars I heard that were going to be there, and I printed these things out and I gave them to my friends in high school, because here's promotion guy, high school age promotion guy. What can I do to get my friends to come see this so they know that I'm friends with this band? And I'm trying to convince everybody, you got to come see this band. You got to come see this band. Somebody from my school showed up at the side stage door, and they said, I got this, and they showed it to the Sean and the people at the side of the door. This is before Kiss went on, earlier, way earlier. People were still coming in before showtime. And where'd you get this from? He said, from Rick Fox. Oh, really? And I'm sitting out in the audience. The house lights are still on. Half the seats are ripped and torn. It was the Fillmore. And so Gene and Paul come walking up to me. Paul puts his foot up on the seat, like a power stance, like I'm blocked in. I can't escape. And Gene's like, "Are you responsible for this?" "Yeah." "Do you realize how much fucking trouble we can get in? We could get our fucking asses sued off for this, with these names on it." I said, "I'm trying to promote and help bring people from my high school. And no matter how I tried to explain what I was trying to do as to help promote the band, Paul and Gene were just like furious at me for doing this. They said, we can get sued for this, with these names on here." I said, it just says might. It doesn't say they're definitely going to be there. I'm trying to convince my friends to come see you. And I think Paul has held that as a grudge against me to this day. So there's no good deed goes unpunished, as they say.
Yeah, these days the verbiage is invited guests include.
Right.
They've been invited. Who knows if they're going to show?
Well, I essentially said the same thing, but I worded it differently, like that. But that wasn't. No, they were pissed off at me for doing that. And there was a time when I was trying to get them to play my high school, and they were all for it. I was on the dance committee, so I'm trying to convince the teachers and the adults. I'm friends with this band. They're incredible. You want to get the first break on these guys before anybody else. Let's get them to come play here in the auditorium. I was trying to get them. Back then $300 for a show was a lot of money in 72, 73.
Yeah, playing the prom and all that stuff.
Exactly. And I was this close to getting Kiss to play my high school. I wrote about him in my school paper. I was on the school paper. Whatever media was in our school, I was on it. Dance committee, newspaper, photography club. Yeah. And finally they went back and forth, and the adults went, maybe a little too risky. We don't know who these guys are. We're going to have to give it a no. And I had to talk to Gene on the phone about it. Again, he was upset. And I said, Gene, I'm only a kid. I'm trying to help get you guys playing my high school. I did everything I could to convince them, except draw blood, to get you guys to play there. And I'm sorry, but it fell through. So, Gene was a young adult at the time. What was he, 22, 23, 24? I'm 17. I'm trying to do what I can to help promote these guys. I'll tell you something, Jay. When that first album came out and it hit the airwaves, I can't tell you how many of those freaking kids in high school who mocked me, made fun of me, came back to me and said, you know what? God damn it, you were right. We should have listened to you. You were right the whole time. Look at this guy. Look at this band. Oh my God. You were right. The makeup, holy cow. You know these guys? And of course, time went on. The first album, first tour, second album, tour. I went to see, we all went to see them play at the Sunshine Inn in New Jersey, Asbury Park. It was I think it was the Hotter Than Hell show.
Okay.
And I had painted the album cover of Hotter Than Hell on the back of one of my friends, everybody wore Wrangler, Levi, the denim jackets.
Yeah.
Before it got to where it is today with people with the buttons and band logos on the back. I painted the album cover of Hotter Than Hell on the back of my friend's denim jacket. On the back of mine was the picture of them, that famous picture in New York City where they're standing at the bus stop and Paul's up at the top of the pole. And they're all kind of leaning into each other. I painted that on the back of my jacket. Again, young marketing guy, promo guy. I've been doing this my whole life. And we showed up. I took pictures. I got that particular time my camera wasn't functioning. I don't want to say it wasn't functioning. It's my fault. But my f-stops for photographers, my f-stops were off. So I got half a picture, white, unexposed, and the other half was them. So I got half exposed pictures. The shutter speed was off from the camera flash. You could salvage them. You could trim them down and kind of get the partial pictures, which I have. But I shot them at the Sunshine. Their logo was so big, the sign, they couldn't put it. There was no place to hang it. They had it over on the stage, right next to Gene on the floor. Like that. I'm trying to think, was it Rory Gallagher on the bill? Anyway, after the show, the house lights go up. There's Bill Aucoin walking around. And we saw Gene walking around. And Gene saw the back of I said, hey, check this out. And he saw my painting of that picture on the back. I don't know if Norman Seif took it or whatever. One of those, they're photographers. And he saw my other friend Joey. He grabs his jacket. He looks at both of them. He takes us both, like an adult with two kids who were, bad. He grabs us by the shoulders and drags us. He goes, Bill, come here. And he drags us over to Bill Aucoin, turns us around and goes, you see this? Gene's now thinking merchandise, marketing. Wow, Kiss jackets. He said, he painted these. Rick painted these on the jackets. You see what you're thinking, what I'm thinking, Bill? I was like, yeah, I see. All right, we're going to make a note of that. And it was so late at the end of the night after the show, we had no way to get a bus back to New York. So they let us, Bill made an arrangement that when they were done with the reception room at the hotel, to let us stay in that room overnight. We kind of slept on the floor or on a pool table or whatever until morning. And then we all got our bus and back up to New York from Jersey. But these were the things that I was doing to help promote the band back in those early days. And then second album, third album came out, and they started, we didn't have as much access to them anymore. They were on the road, they were doing their thing, and yada yada, all of that. Some of the Wicked Lester stuff now started to come out by the third album, like She was originally a Wicked Lester song. Love Her All I Can that was an earlier song, but they didn't have it on the first album. They moved it back. But some of this, they were combining now the material from all of the first three albums. And we would hear stories. Lydia would go out on the road with Peter, with the band. And she'd come back and give us firsthand accounts of road life and what was going on, and the pranks and tricks they would play on each other on the road and like that. And that was, that. If we want to, let's focus a little bit on Ace, because that's what this is about. When they would come off the road, Ace was still very good friends with the guys in the Brats, specifically Rick Rivets. His real name was George. Rick and I were both Slavic guys. I was Polish, he was Slavic. So we became friends many years ago and remained friends until he passed away. But every time Ace was back in New Hey, let's go out and party. So Rick was always like his buddy, his party buddy, wherever they went. And they would go to the clubs. Well, I had already played Max's Kansas City by this time. So I was a regular there at the club, in Manhattan. And Ace, of course, everybody knows what Ace was like when he was out in public and knocking back a few and a few more and a lot more, And anything coming out of his mouth, he would create this endless loop of him laughing at his own jokes, which would feed him to laugh even more at his own laughter, if you follow what I'm saying. So one of my Ace Frehley stories, probably one of the best ones. When you go into Max's, you go up these stairs, because you go to the right and into the downstairs bar area, the restaurant, or you go up the stairs to where the upstairs the club was, where you'd play, and up the stairs even further was the dressing rooms. So we're up at the top of the stairs. Peter Gallagher was the booking agent, and Ace was up. You could hear the cackle. You could hear that hyena cackle. You knew Ace was in the house. And he was up at the top of the stairs with Rick Rivets, and he was cracking jokes. And today they would not be. Some people might find him offensive, but this was Ace Frehley back in the day. Hey, what do you call a lesbian Eskimo? A Klondike. Hey, you heard about the new sneakers for lesbians? No, what are they called? They're called Dikeys. They got an extra long tongue. You can get them off with one finger. And he's cracking himself up like this. And there was, stayed behind him were these gigantic plastic trash cans. That at the end of the night, they clear out the bar and they dump all the stuff in these cans. Well, these were ready to get, they were clean, they were ready to go for the end of the night. And they're stacked into each other, like nesting eggs. Ace was cracking himself up, lost his balance, fell backwards, ass first, into the garbage can. Now it's Ace's head, his arms, and his legs sticking out of the can straight up, and he's stuck, and he can't get out of the can. And he's cracking up. He's like, I'm stuck. I'm fucking stuck. I can't get out of the fucking can. And he's laughing and now everybody upstairs is alerted to this. Everybody's standing there watching and laughing. And poor Ace is, he's got his head, arms, legs, and the head sticking out of the can like this. It was the funniest thing you ever saw. It was like it took a whole bunch of us to tip the can over and get him out like a crab. It was like a crab, exactly. And to get the can, the shell, off the crab like that and dump him out, and he's laying on the floor, hysterically cracking up, laughing and laughing. They eventually got him up. They helped him down the stairs because he was like I said, knocking him back. But he had dropped something on the floor that I looked down, and it was about the size of a laminate, little card like that. And it was blue, and it said, "My name is Ace Frehley, managed by a coin management. If I'm found, please return me to." It was like, return me to. Make a phone. Call this number, and they had these ID cards on them. If anything happened to them, to contact the proper authorities to come rescue them or help them or whatever. And he was already gone at this point, and I was like, wow. So I pocketed that, and I held that for quite a while. And then it was either stolen from me or I lost it. I don't know what happened, but that would be worth its weight in gold right now if I still had that. And that was that was one of the Ace stories. When we would go to watch them rehearse, my friend John would bring a 6-pack of beer, Budweiser beer, for himself. And Ace would see that. Hey John, can I have one of your beers? Yeah, sure. He gives him a beer. Hey, Ace would drink that down. Hey, John, can I get another one of your beers? Sure, here. Ace wound up drinking almost, the whole 6-pack on John. He was like constantly bumming all the beers off off of John. That's another Ace story. And I wish John was here. We could to tell you that. And these are some of the endearing memories I have of Ace Frehley. He used to call me that kid from Brooklyn. We bumped into each other at the NAMM show. I think it was around 87 or 88, something like that. And I said, hey, Ace, you remember me? And he's like, oh yeah, the kid from Brooklyn. Hey, how you doing? Hey, let's take a picture. Come here. And he had the Beanie and Cecil T-shirt on. I can send you a picture of that. And the red blazer. And we're both in our sunglasses. He came in and he put his arm around me and we took a picture. He goes, I remember you. You used to come up to the loft all the time. I said, yeah, that's a... He goes, so what do you, and we'd make small talk. What are you doing? I don't know. What are you doing? Blah, 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 like that, And I got to see Frehley's Comet when they headlined in L.A. at the Wiltern Theater. Faster Pussycat opened, and Peter Criss was there. So, Peter had...
This was on the first album or the second album?
I think it was the Frehley's Comet. I think it was the first one, yeah. And so I had my picture taken with Peter, and like that. And I didn't get to talk to Ace that much. But jumping ahead a few years, when I had my band Sin, and we were the only unsigned band managed out of Jerry Weintraub's company, Management 3, out of Beverly Hills. And I'll show you how this ties in with Ace. They brought Dana Strum in, who was a bass player at the time for Vinnie Vincent. A lot of people don't know Dana was the guy responsible for putting Randy Rhoads in with Ozzy Osbourne. I don't know why he gets left out of the whole story of Ozzy and Randy, but he was the guy that brought Randy.
A lot of people talk about that,
They talk about it, but you don't see it in any kind of like official interviews. Nobody says, well, Dana Strum was the guy that introduced Randy to Ozzy. He doesn't. That credit is not. You don't see that. People talk, but it's not documented. And
I don't think he was officially hired by Sharon. I don't think he was paid. But I think he had tried out, for bass in the band, didn't get it, and he said, "Hey, I can help you find a guitarist." So I think he was just being helpful, and to most of us, we know he earned that credit.
What Dana told me was he would go visit Ozzy at Ozzy's hotel that you hear about with the beer cans and the pizza boxes and garbage all over the floor. Ozzy was going through a whole,
I think it was the Park Hotel, one of those hotels off of La Cienega down there, Beverly Hills.
One of those. And Dana told me, because we've been seeing each other whenever they're doing a gig that I can get to. He gave me some Slaughter laminates. So he goes, anytime, wherever we are on the road, just show up. You got the laminates, come on in. And I was going to go see them at the St. Louis show, with Slaughter, Angel, and Ace Frehley. It was right when Ace canceled the show. So, and I had just gotten out of the hospital about my kidney stones. So there was that. But Dana said that he was going to visit Ozzy. He was in this despondent, miserable state of mind, not knowing where he's going to go at this point. And he said, I got the guitar player. I got the man. I got the guy. Trust me. All right. And he convinced Ozzy to go with him to this place where Ozzy was going to check out guitar players. And he said he went and got Randy, and he brought Randy. And Ozzy was like half not even paying attention. And Randy started playing. And as the story goes, Ozzy was like, half inebriated. He goes, all right, he's got the gig. Not really realizing, he wasn't fully watching Randy go through his motions with that. He just heard the guitar, and he went, all right, he's got the gig, just like that. So Dana is not getting any documented credit for being the guy introducing Randy Rhoads to Ozzy, and the rest is history, as they say. So Dana came on board to produce my band Sin. And we did 4 album master quality songs on this album master demo at Kendon Recording Studios in Burbank, which is where Paul McCartney, Quincy Jones, Stevie Wonder, they were all in there recording.
Oh yeah, big time.
In daytime, we would come in at night on the spec deal, like that. And Dana was producing us. And so we got to this song called We Got Your Rock. A lot of Aces fans know that he did that on one of his albums. the reason why, as a lot of people don't know, as everybody who knows Dana knows, he's got his fingers in everything in the industry. There isn't very much that goes on that he doesn't know about. And I was there when he did this. He picks up the phone. He calls George Sewitt, who was Ace's manager at the time in New York. And this is like the middle of the night in Los Angeles. And he goes, "Hey, George, listen to this." And he holds the phone up, and you can hear us going, da-da-da-da, da-da-da. Sewitt goes, "Who the fuck is that?" He goes, "It's a band I'm producing called Sin." He goes, "We're doing that song." He goes, "Well, looks like we beat you to it." He goes, "Oh, shit, now we got to hurry up and get it out before you guys do." Because Dana said that was the song that scared the shit out of George Sewitt, because our version was beefier and heavier because of the arrangements that Dana did to the song. The backstory is We Got Your Rock came from Marty Coopersmith, who was in Jay and the Americans. He was one of the songwriters for Jay and the Americans. He wrote the song as a follow-up for Joan Jett for I Love Rock and Roll. She heard it, turned it down because she said it sounds too much like I Love Rock and Roll. It's got that same call and answer groove, grunge and groove to it. So it wound up in the hands of an all-female band, and thanks for the opportunity for me to explain it, so I don't have to keep telling people over and over. It was a female band in Long Island called Scarlet Fever. They were doing it. Nobody knew much about it. The drummer from Scarlet Fever wound up dating the bass player in a New York band called Alien. When she left Scarlet Fever and they broke up, the song now went from Marty to Scarlet Fever to Alien. And they didn't put it on their EP. They have Alien put out a 5-song EP. One of my previous guitar players was in the band. His real name's Joe Maffey, but he went by the name of J.J. Christie. So Alien was now. I have a video of them doing a concert at Syosset High School in Long Island doing We Got Your Rock in its earliest infancy of it. And when Alien broke up, JJ called me in California, got my number, I don't know how, and he said, "I heard Kiss is auditioning guitar players. Can you get me a slot?" I said, "They already got some guy named Vinnie Vincent. However, I'm reforming Sin. Do you want to come out and join me?" He said, "All right." So he got the singer, Frank Starr, who later went to become the front man for the Four Horsemen. And then he brought the other guitar player, Richie, with him, Richie Pagano, who did some work with Sabotage. I don't remember how much, but... So these guys drove across the country, met me in California. We put the second lineup of Sin together, and they showed me We Got Your Rock. I said, "All right, we'll put that in the set." I didn't have a lot of songs coming out of my first lineup, so we absorbed a lot of the Alien material, and I reworked it, I revamped it, I made some changes, we beefed it up, made their stuff heavier, and that's what we did when we were playing all the clubs. You know, when our first show, we headlined at Troubadour. It was packed. But We Got Your Rock has always been a crowd pleaser in our set. And so when Dana came to watch us do a rehearsal, he listened to the whole set, and he picked my song On the Run. He's picked We Got Your Rock, Break Down the Walls, which I wrote half of, and Don't Say Goodbye, which was an Alien song. And that's what's on our album master demo. And so it was just really amusing to watch Dana scare the shit out of Ace's manager, because we were doing We Got Your Rock and they were doing We Got Your Rock. And everybody who's heard the side-by-side comparison said the Sin version blows away Frehley's version of it. It's like his song is on threads and ours is on concrete and steel. So, but a lot of people in the world don't know that. They hear my version of We Got Your Rock, and they go, "Didn't Ace Frehley do that song?" And I can't go into the whole drawn-out story to explain how that happened, like I just told you. Now we have it for posterity, of the story of We Got Your Rock and how Ace Frehley was doing it and Sin was doing it at the same time. What are the odds of that? I don't know. To this day, Dana Strum laughs about that because we talked about it recently. Slaughter was on tour. They played in Joplin with Quiet Riot, and they headlined, I think. I forget who else was on the bill. But, so Dana we get to catch up on stuff on the missing time frames like that. So Dana was telling me, yeah, this is what happened with George Stewart, and you guys were doing it and scared the hell out of them. So there's another tie-in circling back around between myself and Ace Frehley. So there's always going to be that connection from me, that kid in high school, marketing promotion guy from Kiss, from back when nobody knew who they were, before they were Kiss, coming full circle to this day. And then Frehley, of course, sadly passing away, and really rocking the rock world with the immense loss of this. And everybody's now second guessing, what's Gene and Paul going to do? What are they going to say? They could have done this. They should have done that, this, that, and the other. Peter was there with his wife, with Ace at the end, but Gene and Paul weren't. So people are going to find these things to pick on and pull at, and you know how it is, social media. Everybody's an armchair general and think they know what's best for everybody else.
Well, all three remaining surviving members of Kiss were at the funeral. So
at the funeral, yeah, they were just, there's pictures on the internet of Gene and Paul at an airport.
He's buried in Bronx, near where his parents are buried, and in basically the neighborhood he grew up in.
Yeah.
So, but I always find it interesting that Gene and Paul are essentially teetotalers. They pride themselves in never being, on drugs and drinking. And Ace was the party animal, seems like from pretty early on. It seems, like they would have, gravitated away from him or something early on. But it must have been something about the playing, the creativity that allowed him. Maybe they thought he'd keep it in check. But obviously, being the ultimate bad boy, Ace took it to a whole another level.
From that first audition, Gene says, we're going to play a song, we'll go through a couple of bars, and you could come in. And that was Deuce. They went through the song, they started, and Ace, okay, now's your, and Ace started ripping his, and it was like, holy cow. It was like that shock moment, like, this is the guy. He's the guy. Because of the phrasings and what we eventually, which is famously now, in history, all those leads you hear Ace doing on that first album is what he was playing there in the loft in front of us. And to this day, I went back on the internet, I was on YouTube, I was watching their Midnight Special show, and the Dick Clark thing with the stage with the rainbow over it.
Uh-huh.
And I'm watching and I'm listening to Ace's solo, and the hairs are going up as I talk about it. They do it now. The hairs on my arms go up because I'm that kid, that high school kid back in the loft in 72, 73, watching them play that in front of me. So there's that trigger moment. How I felt then is still going up my spine and sticking the hairs up on my arms to this day for what he was playing in Deuce. And you can hear him doing it in all his other songs. There's a guy on the internet that plays 13 of the best Ace Frehley solos. And he plays it note for note, just like Ace did. And I'm sitting there watching and go, this guy's got it nailed. But musicians, guitar players who watch this, they can see Ace would repeat a lot of his same phrasings. It was Chuck Berry. There's a lot of Chuck Berry in that as well.
Yeah.
Those repetitive patterns. I don't remember what the technical terms are for the scales that he played. I should, but I don't. But just watching the hand movements, like, okay, he did that in this song. Parasite, he did that in this song. All the Way, he did that in this song. So Ace developed and created his own style. Nobody else has been able to do. So
well, no doubt he was a fan of Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck and Clapton. The classic British invasion guitar heroes.
Yeah, and then those guys all played blues scales.
I'm assuming before it closed down, Ace probably used to frequent the Fillmore East and see some of those legendary bands.
Yeah. One of the times he came up to the loft, he was all crying and messed up, and he was like, because Ace used to drive a cab, And,
Right.
in New York City,
Paul
some
used to drive a cab too.
cab drivers used to get held up. And he came up to the loft crying. He said, they beat me up and they robbed me. Somebody pulled Ace out of his cab and they beat him up and they stole his money. So that's another story of from what I remember back in the day. And I remember when you said Gene and Paul were teetotalers. Yeah, one of the stories, I don't know if I can say this, that Lydia told us when she came back from off the road. They played a prank. You know how bands are. Everybody plays pranks on each other. They played a prank on Gene because he liked to have cookies and milk before he went to bed at night. And his mother used to make him cookies and all of that. And so somebody made cookies that had hash in them. They made hash cookies. And they, unsuspecting Gene, they gave him the hash cookies. So now here's Gene, like, stoned on hash cookies. And it pissed him off. He said, you guys, I'll fucking kill you guys. Like that. And they would play, they know Gene was homophobic. That's the word they use now. And Peter and Paul played a prank on Gene when he comes into the hotel room and he's knocking on the door and he goes, Peter, Paul, anybody in here? And they planned to be in the shower with the curtain closed and like they were naked. And Gene comes in, he moves the shower, he's in here and he moves the shower curtain. Is Peter and Paul playing like they're gay, as a prank on Gene. And Gene was like, he flipped. I don't remember the exact words, but I don't know if I can repeat them here. But this is their sophomore humor. Their funhouse fraternity style pranks that they would play on each other.
Yeah, juvenile delinquency.
These were the stories Lydia would come back with, and we would sit there like kids in front of the TV or in front of the old time radio, and she'd tell us the stories of this, that, and what's going on here, what they did here, and we're just cracking up. We just were soaking it up like a sponge. To hear our heroes are now off flying over the world and spreading their influence. Then we started to see it in Rock Scene magazine with what they did in Detroit at the high school with the parade. And all of that. And it was,
Yeah,
now,
Cadillac, Michigan.
Exactly. Yeah, the news was coming back.
Piss off.
Everybody, Bob Gruen, photographer, Niels Lozer, photographer. We start to see stuff in the rock magazines. It comes like a month or so late, 2 months later. But with by the time it's in and published and released, we were getting it after the fact. But we're seeing Kiss everywhere. And I got to tell you, Jay, not to feel like a proud parent, I don't know if that's the proper terminology for it, but to just sit back and go, we were there. Those are our guys.
Well, I always say that's the magic time, the sweet spot between going from a nobody to a household name. That is what everybody strives for. It happens very rarely in the world. But to see somebody go from barely able to get 10 or 20 people at a gig to selling out a stadium.
And I see comments online from Kiss fans going, yeah, I just got into them like in 1977 for, Rock and Roll Over or Love Gun. Or that was their introduction to Kiss, well after the fact that they were already established in the world. And it's just to sit there and go, you're just getting into them then. And I was all the way there at the... And if I post something,
well, what was interesting is, Casablanca wasn't necessarily a major label. To them, a record deal is a record deal, but it wasn't like they were Atlantic or Warner Brothers or Columbia Records. And famously, Casablanca moves to Hollywood, offices on Sunset Boulevard, and eventually Kiss moves out to California. Do you remember around that time? After Dress to Kill, around the
Neil Bogart came out of Buddha Records, who were putting out all of these bubblegum pop hits.
Yeah.
60s, early
Top
70s.
40 stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And so from Buddha, and he created Casablanca. When Neil first saw and heard Kiss, he heard some of those potential hits like that. And so he got on board right away. And they got that took new management or at least new record label, and people involved with that label. So the big push for Casablanca was Kiss. You know, Donna Summer didn't come until later. Angel didn't come until later. You know, Saturday Night, all that other stuff, the disco, that came later. They were putting everything, and as the story goes, you know, Bill Aucoin put himself in debt funding those first 3 tours on his American Express card. And by the grace of God,
if the Alive album didn't break, they could have gone belly up.
I was just about to say, by the grace of God, Kiss Alive took off, and all the dollars started now to roll in, and they were paying off all their debts. And now they're going from the red, now they're in the black. And now they're starting to feel a little bit, you know, hey, maybe this was really worth it. We never didn't believe in ourselves, but holy cow, look at what's happening now. You know, and it's just a great feeling for me and my friends who were there at the beginning, John and whatnot, to sit there and go, man, we watched the magic happen before the rest of the world even knew. They weren't even Kiss yet. And we got to see, and like I said, people post their comments in Facebook and on social media going, yeah, I just got into them at, you know, Love Gun and Rock and Roll Over and like that later in their career. And I would post some of my pictures from the Coventry and the Fillmore shows. And these people respond with, wow, I never seen this before. Wow, you really were there back in the beginning. I said, yes, I was. You know, and I'm sharing. My pictures have been illegally reproduced and sold to thousands of people around the world. I'll never see that money again. And nobody knew I was the guy who took those pictures. Comes along Ken Sharp. Okay? Of all the books, authors, the Kiss authors, and books that were put out about early Kiss, either they didn't know about me, I wasn't on their radar, I didn't have that visibility, I don't know. Never got any kind of credit, or I got left behind in the mix, fell through the cracks, whatever. Nobody knew who Rick Fox was that took these pictures. They weren't putting together that picture. Oh, this guy took that. Oh, no, I know. So Ken Sharp reached out to me. Somebody recommended him to reach out to me, and he said, I'm writing this book called Nothing to Lose: The Making of Kiss, 1972 to 75. I would like your permission to license some of your early Kiss photos for the book, and I will interview you as well, which we did. Ken says one of the primary reasons he is, I've seen you not getting any acknowledgement for all of these years. Hang on a second, my phone's. I've seen you not get any acknowledgement and fall by the wayside. I'm kind of here to help put a stop to that. And I'd like you to be one of the people in my book, featured in my book. So, which was great. And because I still hold and own all of those negatives of Kiss that I took back in the day, and you got to understand my apprehension about them leaving my possession after already being burned before, and I didn't know who Ken Sharp was. But I got all these guarantees in place, and we signed paperwork, and we airshipped first class overnight, and he got my negatives. They printed everything they needed to print for their files, and then he did me a favor and printed some other stuff from other bands that I worked with through Aucoin. Spike, which was one of Sean Delaney's bands. So Sean brought me on board to work. It was a side project he had. They would like a 3-piece version of Kiss. So Ken printed all of these for me, put them on CD discs like that, and sent them back. So I got everything back intact. He kept his promise. The book came out. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller. And now I have a little more street cred going, I'm in this book. I'm in this book.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Nothing to Lose, like the song. And it's a semicolon, The Making of Kiss, 1972 to 1975. And it's just that period, from the very beginning until 75, when they broke. And I'm in the book. And I also introduced Ken to my friend John Alton. He's in the book. Anne-Marie Hughes is in the book. I had lost touch with the Criscola sisters decades ago. They had moved on, gotten their own families, and married and whatnot. So I don't even talk to them anymore. But all of us were in the book, and everywhere I'm sharing one of my anecdotes about my memories of Kiss. Immediately after that would be like a response from Gene, further clarifying what I was saying. So there's Rick Fox saying this, there's Gene Simmons saying this about what I had said, like that. And so I got that validation, under my belt, which was great. And then some years after that, I got contacted by a guy named Kurt Gooch, who has been involved in writing about Kiss for many years. Word got back to me that he had put some of my pictures in one or two of some of his books or whatever, and I didn't get any credit on it. But here's Kurt reaching out to me, and I said, well, we have to clear some things up first. What's about my pictures in your books? And push didn't come to shove, but let's just say we worked things out. And Kurt, apologized for that to me over the phone. And he said, listen, the reason I'm calling is... And then he gave me the whole... what's the word I'm looking for? He was involved with the A&E special, the Kiss special. And he says, we'd like to license some of your photos, your early Kiss photos, and we'll pay you for them. Okay, that works. And they gave me a nice check for, they used maybe 3 or 4 pictures. And when I watched the Kiss A&E special, it comes on fast. There's that, and there's my Coventry picture, and there's my Fillmore East picture. And then when the credits roll at the end, is Rick, of all the people who contributed, photographers, it said Rick Fox in there. So now I'm in 2 officially sanctioned platforms that acknowledging that I was there in the very beginning about Kiss. The rest of the world, nobody knows. Everything news travels fast. You're here and you're gone 5 minutes later. So I'm getting a lot of people going, wow, you were there back? I didn't know that. Because that's how fast the world moves. So you got to kind of keep posting so that people catch up, and it spreads through all of the Kiss Facebook groups. There's like, I don't know, 10 or 15 different Kiss Facebook groups. I'm in like about 10 of them, 11. And I say, I'm sharing some of my pictures. Here's some of my... And I've done podcast interviews like I'm doing with you. I did the Decibel Geek was one of the first ones I did. And they did a big special about Kiss. And there's various other, Kiss Facts, FAQ, this, that, and the other. So I did several podcasts like we're doing now, talking about my stories with early Kiss. And that's all I have left outside of writing a book that people can hear immediately. Here's me talking about this time, and I'm talking about this time, and I'm talking about this time. And then, of course, you get a couple of assholes who go, it's not about you, it's about them, it's about Ace, it's about Kiss, it's not about you.
What do you think it was about Ace's personality that really created such an endearment to the fans and created this otherworldly character? Because, Paul's playing the rock star, Gene's the demon, and Peter's the cat man. But Ace's character and just his personality seemed to endear with so many people. What do you think some of those traits were?
Ace had that kind of person. Hey, this guy could make you laugh no matter what. He'd spot out these jokes.
He was like a wisecracker.
And make himself laugh based on how funny he was laughing before that. And he had all these crazy jokes and anecdotes that would be... And like we all saw on the Tom Snyder show. So you're a spaceman. He goes, no, I'm a plumber. That was Ace. That was Ace all the time like that. Or if he was being quiet and he'd say something and he was funny, he'd cackle but at a lower volume. It wouldn't be like for the whole room. He was just one of those guys that, in a good way, get under your skin. And he felt good to be around. I'd see him hang out at a club, and I'd go over and say hi to him. Hey, the kid from Brooklyn, how you doing? Hey, come on, sit down. He was approachable. Even though he had his bodyguards.
He was an everyman. You could relate to him.
You hit the nail on the nose. He was that's what Ace and Peter were like, the everyman guys. Peter was a little bit more, who the fuck are you? What do you need to be near me for? Like that. because Pete's Italian. He was around the familia, those people in Williamsburg, in Brooklyn. Before they moved to Greenpoint, where I was. Peter grew up in a rough neighborhood, so you had to be badass to survive. Otherwise, you get your ass beat. Him and Jerry Nolan from the Dolls. So there was that. Gene was kind of always. Gene was like the skyscraper. He was the statue. He just got to be standing with his arms folded, and he'd find ways to not put you down, but to he was not a snob, but the best way to approach Gene is talk about horror films. That breaks the ice. And we talked about Harryhausen and 20 Million Miles from Earth and the monster. And you got your moves from this monster. And yeah, but he wasn't called that. He was called an Emir. Oh, yeah, you're right. Like that. And so we could talk horror movies, and that kind of brought us on a little bit more of a level playing field. I never really got to talk to Paul too much. He just seemed like he didn't want to talk to us. Like we were beneath him. He had that air about him, if you will, like he was somebody special. He knew he was somebody special, and he knew he was going to be even bigger somebody special later on, because Paul was a rock star, right? From you look at their childhoods, what they went through.
Yeah.
Life made them that way.
He had a deformed ear, and hard of hearing in one ear, and I mean he overcame all that, and I think it was the four distinct characters. Kind of like the Beatles, John and Paul and Ringo and George. They were different from each other, but together they made a magic.
Yeah,
kind of like that. Four distinct individuals.
Yeah, Gene was into the horror movies. Ace was into science fiction, so it's only natural for him to be a space guy. And in '75, when I got the gig with the Martian Rock Band, and my first professional debut at Max's Kansas City, and I was trying to create a persona for myself. I'm like, what am I going to be? I'm in it's called the Martian Rock Band. So we're into Mars, we're into science fiction. Sebastian Black, the band leader, Sebi, was all big into, that's what, again, when we first met, what broke the ice was science fiction and the old Republic serials, the Cliffhangers, Commander Cody, A Day the Earth Stood Still. We were talking science. Oh, yeah, you're the guy. You got to be in this band. But they didn't have a look. They didn't look science fiction. So I went to Capezio, the ballet company, the store in New York. I bought a black spandex bodysuit, and I looked at the cover of Kiss Alive, and I looked at Ace's costume. I go, okay, he's got meteor showers and shooting stars and rhinestones. That's what I did. I went home, and I got the rhinestone thing, and I made shooting stars and rhinestones and all this other space stuff on there, and I created myself into like a lizard, a reptilian, before reptilian was now a thing in these decades, and I made myself green food coloring in my mouth, so like that, and I used to. Kiss was my influence. I was a combination of Ace and Gene, so I was like this kind of demonic space creature who would spit out green blood, and I would shoot fire out of my hands. I'm wearing it on my sleeve. Kiss was definitely a direct influence on my first persona in rock, like that. And I was a space guy, like Ace, and that's, they've definitely left their imprint on me. So, I'm proud to wear that one on my sleeve. Kiss influenced me, and I use that as my stage persona. I was one of the guys who could get away with that. And
being the space ace, the space cadet probably played into his love of party favors,
that reminds me.
Smoking, popping, and whatever it took. He was out there.
Okay, you've just brought me to another Ace story. This is classic. When I was in WASP, Blackie told me when Ace would come to Los Angeles, he'd come to hang out and visit, because when he wasn't in New York, if he was in LA and he had some downtime, he'd call up, him and Blackie would hang out. Blackie said they were at Ace's hotel. It might have been at the Hyatt on Sunset. I think that's what it was.
The
and they
Riot
were like,
House?
Yeah, exactly. And the Riot House. They were up, upstairs near the top, and Ace's balcony faced Sunset Boulevard below him.
Yeah.
And Ace, he's going, I'm bored. Let's do so. Let's have some fun. So he goes, "You got toy stores around here?" Blackie goes, "Yeah." So he took him to that big toy store that was on Hollywood Boulevard, and Ace bought hundreds of those little plastic parachute army men. You know, they're molded like this with the rifle, and they have a parachute. Blackie says Ace bought like a box of them. And he went back to the hotel, and he sat there, and they opened up each one of them, laid them in the box like that, and then Ace goes up to the balcony over Sunset Boulevard, and he goes, "Woo!" And he dumps like hundreds of these little parachute soldiers. And the people downstairs in the street are going, "Oh, what?" And it's all these parachute guys coming down on Sunset Boulevard in the traffic. Cars are like stopping. You just got to just picture all of these green army men with their parachutes.
Nobody was down below to film that.
Oh no, it was a classic Kodak moment, and it cracks me up to think just the thought of seeing hundreds of these army men parachuting down over Sunset Boulevard. It was just Ace. Of course, Ace is upstairs cracking up with that, his signature cackle. But that was another one of the funniest Ace stories I've ever heard.
I thought you were going to say he's throwing them one by one, not expecting the
No.
whole box to go.
Blackie said we had a box of them, and we opened up each package. We opened up each guy and laid him in the box with the parachute. So it would open, real careful like that. And he goes, and he takes the box, dumps it upside down off the balcony, and the wind was carrying him out over Sunset Boulevard. So he had this whole box of a couple hundred of these guys parachuting down on Sunset Boulevard. It was the funniest thing you've ever seen. I don't think Ace got in trouble for it, but it was a traffic stopper, definitely.
Now, Blackie, did Blackie know him from high school or from pre-Kiss?
The connection that I remember is the guy that used to bring us to rehearsal, Sister and Wasp rehearsal, is Mike Solon. Mike Solon is the brother of Eddie Solon, who was Ace Frehley's first guitar tech and their first sound guy.
Okay.
So there's a definite connection to Kiss right there. And Mike used to drive us to rehearsal all the time. Mike is the guy who plays the bartender in the Wasp video, Blind in Texas.
All right.
He's when they come in and go, "We're here to play a gig," he goes, "What's a gig?" Like that. That's Mike Solid. That was the guy who used to drive us to rehearsal all the time. And his brother Eddie was Ace's guitar tech and their sound guy. So there was a connection to Kiss through that. And I don't remember how Blackie said that he became friends with Ace. As far as going to school as kids, I don't remember Blackie ever telling me that.
It seemed to predate, obviously, the band. They knew each other before that, is what I understood.
Yeah. Well, Blackie had
I don't know if
sister.
it went all the way back to high school, because you would think Ace would be a couple years older than Blackie.
Yeah. I have a picture. I forgot where I got it. I have a picture of Blackie when he was in military school, as a young adolescent, and he's in uniform. He's got the piss cutter hat, they hang over their belt, shaped like from the front looks like a clown hat, and he's standing there like this, and he's smiling. His father put him into a military school when he was a kid. So, but I don't remember exactly. Black, when I was first in the band, Blackie was pretty much open about everything. So he would tell me all the stories of this, that, and the other about stuff and his stuff in the business. Like when he was with Killer Kane and in the Dolls and all of that.
Right.
But I don't remember exactly how he hooked up with Ace, but they became friends. And there was a rumor going around that Ace Frehley produced a Wasp demo, which, if it did, I wasn't in the band because that didn't happen when I was in them.
Well, Ace talks about being in a part of a street gang, prior to, playing in bands, because it was probably something in the neighborhood. You hung out with the cool guys, and they were into trouble.
Well, like George Carlin, who also grew up in the Bronx, one of the best ways to survive from getting your ass kicked is being funny. Right. And if you make everybody laugh, nobody's going to pick on you because you're a funny guy, and they like having you around. So Ace was a funny guy when he was younger too. So I'm going to go ahead and speculate that him being a joker like that, and not really getting into fights, he probably carried a stiletto, but I don't think he ever used it. I never heard him talk about his time in gangs. of course, when he got robbed from his cab and got beat up, how tough could you be if you got beat up driving a cab? You know, he just wasn't like a fighter. He was just he'd drink and party and tell jokes and laugh. He was always the party guy.
Yeah.
And him and Peter got along like peas and carrots, like that. You know.
Well, obviously that division between Paul and Gene and Ace and Peter seemed to be natural. The bad boys of rock, but ultimately, Paul and Gene, owned the ship. They controlled the entity. They sold out for the big bucks. So
they did.
It is sad that Ace probably didn't pass with a huge nest egg because he sold everything to Kiss. He signed Peter and Ace signed everything off to Gene.
He's still got a catalog though.
They probably a little solo catalog, and you get a little writer share unless he sold those publishing rights, which a lot of people have.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, Ace's nest egg is not nearly what Gene or Paul's nest egg is going to be.
Yeah. Well, we're there's the word out there, for what it's worth, that he owed a little to the IRS. He was a little in debt, and his daughter is like now what do I do? So I'm not going to speak for his daughter. I don't know her, but he's got I'm sure he's got good financial advisors around her to guide her as to what to do with the rest of his estate. And there's talk that he was working on a new album, which was almost finished.
Origins 3, which I
Right.
hear somehow or another, they're going to finish that.
Yeah.
Steve Brown and whoever they're going to cobble together with some more vocalists. As long as they had enough guitar tracks, it's a covers album. So
yeah, and my first time at Rockin' Pod in Nashville in 2021, I performed with Ron Keel. It was an all-star jam. Everybody, Billy Sheehan was there, Greg Bissonnet, Carmine Appice, Ricky Rackman was there, and Ron did an acoustic set. Now we went up and we did a Steelers song, we did Cold Day in Hell, we did I think The Right to Rock, and then we did one more song. And the guys that were playing with us in the band I just met for the first time. I didn't know who they were, and I said, "How about Cold Gin?" And we said, "Yeah." And what the guitar players that I was playing with was Jeremy Asbrock, who was Ace's guitar player.
Right.
He had already been established with Ace. I just met him as we walked on stage. Ron goes, "This is Jeremy." And I went, "Oh, okay, hi." I didn't know who he was. And I'm like, "Oh, I played with the guy who played it with Ace." There's another dot connecting right there.
Yeah.
So doing Cold Gin was a natural for all of us. And Brandon Cook, who plays with Black and Blue.
I feel for Jeremy and Ryan, the bass player. Their gig kind of, got pulled out from underneath them. And I know they, loved Ace.
I sent my sentiments to Jeremy, and he said thank you. Don't forget, before those guys back in New York, the Emperor of Rock and Roll, Richie
Scarlett.
Richie Scarlett played with Ace for years.
Forever.
And I knew Richie Scarlett from when he was in Bonnie Parker, the Bonnie Parker band off of Long Island.
Yeah, it was only until Jeremy and Ryan said, "We'll do it for a quarter of the cost." And Ace is like, "Yeah, that's music to my ears,"
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
so
the loyalty ended there.
I know Richie Scarlett is tearing his heart out with this, and the guys currently with Aces. I didn't know Ryan, but I knew Jeremy.
Yeah.
And I saw him again at the 2023.
Well, I know Richie was quite the party guy himself, so he was probably not the best influence on Ace getting sober.
It looked like Richie Scarlett looked like Keith Richards. He had the whole Keith Richards look.
Of course, the Johnny Thunders Keith Richards look.
Bingo, exactly. Yeah. And I'm still friends with Richie to this day. We go back to New York, to the 70s, like that. There's another dot connected. See, to Ace and the people that around him. We're all part of that Ace Frehley universe. All rotating around him at various distances at one point or another. And then interconnect and then bounce off and go our own way again, like that.
Yeah.
So I felt bad for Jeremy. I'm really sorry, man. I'm really, really sorry. And he said, "Thank you." Like that.
Well, of course, Gene and Paul and Tommy and Eric. They did the final tour, the end of the road. So they don't own Kiss anymore.
Yeah.
Of course, they'll be involved in some of these events and stuff like that. It'd be interesting to see if there will be. They talk about the holograms and the avatars and all that. It'd be interesting to see if there, for a new generation, there'll be a new Kiss with four younger guys in those characters with new songs. I'm wondering.
Well, there's a lot of Kiss tribute bands that are doing it just, you can almost not tell the difference between the tribute band and Kiss themselves.
Yeah, they spend a lot of money to try and get the boots and the gear and the makeup right.
I dressed as Gene one Halloween. We had another rock club in New York called the 82 Club, and a lot of television and entertainment industry people. It was a drag club,
Okay.
drag queens and all of that, and people would go and sit around the tables, without being photographed in a drag club, where they could go and not be bothered. But they started having rock bands play there, the New York glam rock bands, and I went dressed as Gene, and I did his makeup on my face. I had a black curly-haired wig. I had a red satin, one of those, looks like an oversized newsboy hat. Something some guys wear. Noddy Holder would wear one, but it was. And I had a big red satin one. And on my denim jacket, here's Rick thinking. I took an umbrella skin and I cut it right up the middle, and then I sewed that inside my sleeve to my side on both sides. So when you pick your arms up, it formed the bat wings.
Yeah, half
See?
an umbrella.
Right, like that. And I had I had platform boots that were like, Jesus, maybe 5 inch in the platform and 8 inch in the heels. And I walked myself I got to the club and I walked down and everybody in the club thought it was Gene. And I didn't talk as much to give it away, but I knew certain mannerisms and things that Gene would talk like this like all the time. And I could say, I'm here for tonight. I'll be leaving shortly, like that. Just enough to fake Gene's voice to get away with it. And everybody in the club thought it was Gene. Coming up, hey Gene, hey Gene, hey Gene, like that. And I've actually pulled it off until I walked out and left the club. I was always thinking.
Hats off to Tommy Thayer because he supported the band. He was the tour manager. He was the fill-in for Ace. And when Gene said, "You got to put on the makeup," Ace is not gonna make it tonight. Tommy always did it in tribute to Ace. He said, "Look,
Yeah.
I'm playing the character, but this is one of my heroes here." Of course, he played in a Kiss, tribute band with Jamie St. James.
Right.
But brings me back when Black and Blue first came to L.A. They opened for the original Steeler, at the Whiskey. So there's connections. There's connections here, and of course,
not connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, Rick Fox joining with Ron Keel and Mark Edwards, and then some little Swedish guy. I forget his name from Europe. And there is a Steeler documentary coming, so we do look forward to that, Rick. That's another feather in your cap.
I hope they release it while I'm still alive to see it.
What the hell is it? Gone with the Wind?
I asked Ron.
Did we shoot that 3 years ago?
I poked a little. It'd be nice to see it soon, kind of a thing. And Ron goes, 2034, 50th anniversary of Kiss, 50th anniversary of Steeler. And I'm like, oh, come on, guys, do it while I'm still alive. And again, connecting those dots. While we were recording We Got Your Rock in the studio, and I have a picture of this. Dana's at the soundboard. I'm standing behind him. Les Cooper is the other engineer is behind him. There's Tommy Thayer wearing an Atom Bomb T-shirt. Him and his bass player Patrick came down from Black and Blue and helped sing the gang vocals on We Got Your Rock right here. So they were in the studio with us, and people look at that picture. Is that Tommy Thayer? So, yeah, and he's wearing an Atom Bomb shirt. So Adam apparently has connections to Ace.
Well, I go back to the 70s with Adam because I was in the Seattle Vancouver market, 76 through 80, and Adam was a little kid coming up, sneaking backstage at the Judas Priest shows and all that. So it's all connected.
He was another Rick Fox.
Yeah. Seattle, Portland, Tommy Thayer. I mean, it's all connected, The West Coast from Vancouver to Southern California. It is definitely a heartland.
What's been upsetting all the fans lately is the media, the mainstream media, CBS, NBC, ABC.
Right.
They don't have a proper research department. And when they were announcing Ace Frehley's passing, they were putting pictures of Tommy Thayer in Ace's makeup, and everybody was going ballistic, anger, going, "Can't you get it straight? Don't you know who the difference?" No, they don't know the difference. They just see the character and the makeup, and they see, they think Tommy and Ace are the same person, and it was upsetting all the Kiss fans everywhere that they were using Tommy's picture instead of the actual picture of Ace. So, and I understand that. That's
we all pay tribute to the late great Paul Ace Frehley. And, of course, long live Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, and Peter Criss. And I know Peter is up there, and I understand he's no longer dyeing his hair. So if you're going to see Peter, you're going to see the silver fox, just like Carmine Appice now.
The silver cat, yeah. Yeah.
The
man,
silver cat.
I'm still playing with mine,
Yeah, man. It's that L'Oreal number 5.
You never say die. Never say die.
Well, our special...
Unless it's black dye.
Yeah, well, our special guest has been the one and only Rick Fox. We love him. We go back Steeler days, way before that. I would say my brother from another mother. He came up on the right coast. I grew up all over the world, so I've been in L.A. since '80. So I kind of beat you over here by a minute, but so many connections, so many great stories. Rick, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and of course, I was going to reach out to you. We've talked Kiss before. We also talk Steeler. We talk all this Wasp and all that. So it's a pleasure, and thanks so much for all that you've done for rock and roll. And I know you're not done yet. You still do your thing, and hopefully more to come. We love that latest Steeler video and song.
Thank you. From your lips to God's ears, I hope. I hope I still have some more significant time before the whole world goes, like that. So, but I thank you for having me on. As always, Jay, it's a pleasure. It's an honor. It's a privilege, and giving me a platform to share my memories of growing up with rock and roll and all the stars I rubbed shoulders with. Thank you for giving me that platform. I appreciate it.